Movies are made for many reasons: to entertain, to inform, and to provoke the audience's thoughts. And in the arena of big-budget Hollywood, generally a movie's aim is to make as much money as possible, usually through appealing characters, whip-smart dialogue, and breathtaking action sequences. By being cool, basically. But of course, for every genuinely cool and edgy movie, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, that tried and failed to evoke that same feeling. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Whatculture, here with 10 movies that tried way too hard to be cool. Number 10. Sucker Punch. Zack Snyder is no stranger to making edgy, stylish movies that sharply divide audiences, though he's never tried harder to make a cool movie or fallen flatter on his face than with his 2011 fantasy action flop, Sucker Punch. Jam-packed with sexy, scantily clad, gun-toting young women who battle hordes of video game-esque CGI enemies, it's as though the film were dreamt up by a hormonal teenage boy. It is, in every sense, the adolescent male id in movie form, and while Snyder himself claims that the film is in fact a self-aware commentary on the inherent sexism present in nerd culture, this doesn't quite vibe when the film so aggressively leers and slobbers over its focal women. It basically gives audiences looking for this type of content exactly what they wanted. As a result, Sucker Punch is more baffling and concerning than it is genuinely creative or cool. Number 9. Only God Forgives. Nicholas Winding Refn is one of the most stylish and singular filmmakers working today, and also one of the most divisive. After Drive, there were high hopes for the director, but things definitely cooled off after the release of Only God Forgives, almost to the point where people couldn't quite decide whether this was a genuinely tantalizing mood piece or a pile of pretentious tosh. It's a molasses slow movie in which Ryan Gosling speaks little and spends long passages staring off into the middle distance. Only God Forgives is also awash in sledgehammer subtle Freudian imagery, casual misogyny, and a whole host of brutal yet forgettable violence. Does the film have any soul or feeling? Well, not really. And while the neon-soaked cinematography is undeniably gorgeous, this felt like Refn flipping the middle finger to anyone, basically everyone, who was just expecting him to make Drive 2, and as a result it kind of comes across as obnoxious. Number 8. Mission Impossible 2. Mission Impossible 2 represented a major tonal and stylistic shift for the franchise, taking a sharp left turn from Brian De Palma's grittier original and allowing action maestro John Woo to deliver one of the most hilariously nutty actioners of the early 2000s. Woo, of course, made his name with his acclaimed Hong Kong action flicks and usually worked with small budgets which forced him to get creative. But in Hollywood, Woo had money liberally thrown at him to execute every last testosterone-fueled idea he could think of, no matter how silly. Mission Impossible 2 was actually Woo's 4th film in Hollywood, but by far his most expensive, budgeted at a stonking $125 million, and the result was an almost inconceivably slick action sequel so over the top as to veer into self-parody. I mean, this is a film where Ethan Hunt and villain Sean leap off their motorcycles and catch one another in mid-air, and while that is enjoyable, it's definitely a product of the try-hard blockbuster feel of the early 2000s. Thankfully, the subsequent sequels scaled things back somewhat, and even in their more outlandish moments have opted for a less exuberant filmmaking style. Number 7. Juno. Jason Reitman's Oscar-winning coming-of-age drama is certainly not a bad movie, but it is one that split audiences right down the middle. For some, the script, which won the Best Original Screenplay Oscar, provided a charmingly offbeat spin on familiar material, while to others, its self-conscious quirkiness was just too navel-gazing and cutesy. And though Reitman's film is terrifically acted, the flowery script often gets in the way of the real dramatic meat. As for every witticism that comes out of the title character's mouth, there's usually an irritating or smug one to follow. Now, if you strip everything away, you'll see that this film is a paint-by-numbers indie vehicle. Weird for the sake of being weird, catchphrases that try to be unique and end up as, well, catchphrases, and a soundtrack where every single song is played on acoustic guitar. Now, I love this film, but it was trying a bit too hard. Number 6. Daredevil. 2003's Ben Affleck starring Daredevil isn't just a bad movie, it's an embarrassing one. Because like so many other early 2000s superhero movies, yes, we're looking at you, Catwoman, it was a case of style over substance. This is a movie full of complex CGI-assisted shots, hack job editing, goofy one-liners, and as evidenced by the cringeworthy use of Evanescence's hit Bring Me to Life during Elektra's hype montage, hilariously outdated. Though Though the R-rated director's cut does restore a lot of the more interesting material and is an altogether much better film, there's no escaping the fact that what most of the public saw was just utterly cringeworthy. Number 5. Equilibrium. Of the many post-Matrix knockoffs released in the 2000s, there is none more memorable in its try-hardiness than Equilibrium, an attempt to take George Orwell's 1984 and crossbreed it with the Wachowskis' action aesthetic. Though it's a relatively well-made film, led by an entertainingly stoic Christian Bale, the film was marketed largely on the basis of its gun kata gimmick, a gun-centric martial arts style invented for the film, which ultimately turned out more silly than cool. Seeing Bale effectively dance his way through gunfights with risibly over-the-top flips is practically the definition of an action movie trying too hard. Given that successful action films tended to favour more gritty, realistic action sequences in the years that followed, such as the Bourne franchise, Equilibrium was quickly forgotten about. Number 4. Halloween, 2007. You have to give Rob Zombie at least some credit for even attempting to remake John Carpenter's horror classic, and being brave enough to mount such a bold reimagining of the mythic horror icon that is Michael Myers. Except, his Halloween wasn't good. At all. Even ignoring the fact that most Halloween fans didn't really want Myers' backstory demystified, Zombie's grungy, white trash-infused tone and aesthetic were so wrong for the franchise. Between the cringeworthy vulgar dialogue and excessive nudity and gore, it felt like a fairly standard attempt to ugly up the more restrained and suspenseful original film. There's a clear vision here for sure, but not the one most fans of the franchise were actually interested in. Number 3. Smokin' Aces. There are so many Pulp Fiction knockoffs out there that it's practically a subgenre unto itself, typically named post-Tarantino, yet precious few of them are actually any good. Case in point, we have 2006 ensemble action flick Smokin' Aces, a frantic and desperate attempt to evoke the same witty, bloody vibe of Tarantino's masterpiece. Though the performances are solid throughout, especially Ryan Reynolds and Jeremy Piven, the prolonged dialogues aren't clever enough to justify their length or inclusion, while most of the bonkers action is covered with spasmodic camera work and infuriating editing choices. It's a film made to entertain edgelord teenagers, despite its R rating, while to anyone older, it's likely to come off as agonizingly over-affected. Number 2. Suicide Squad. To give writer-director David Ayer some minor credit, it sounds like his grittier vision of Suicide Squad was put through Warner Brothers' post-production mangle, as the end result was basically, what if the DCEU made a lame Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff? The opening sequence is more or less an exposition dump montage moving hastily from one character to the next, in the hope of keeping cash-rich teens interested enough to recommend it to their friends. Yet most of the dialogue lacks the wit of Guardians of the Galaxy, the incessant jukebox-style inclusion of pop music felt pandering at best or lazy at worst, and the nihilistic tone came across as totally insincere. And let's not ignore Jared Leto's Joker, a character whose faux cool style and personality embody everything that's wrong with the movie. Over-designed and underthought. Number 1. Revolver. Guy Ritchie's 2005 crime thriller Revolver feels less like an actual Ritchie film than it does a young up-and-coming filmmaker trying to, and horribly I might add, imitate his well-trod style. The whip-smart, wisecrack dialogue Ritchie is best known for is substituted here for pretentious narration amid a puzzle-like narrative that immediately adds it to the pile of post-Tarantino forgettables. It's not all bad. Jason Statham is good and there are some fun action beats, but the positives are largely drowned out by Ritchie's insufferable script, which clearly thinks it's way smarter and more provocative than it actually is. What Ritchie believes to be cool and unique is just overly verbose and tiresomely convoluted. And that's everything for this list. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Whatculture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.